when a menu became a confession. Confessions are rarely planned. They surface when silence becomes heavier than truth. In one restaurant, honesty did not arrive through words or apologies, but through a menu that could no longer hide what the chef was becoming. For years, the menu had been immaculate, balanced, confident, admired. Each dish reinforced a clear identity, one critics understood and guests trusted. Success followed consistency, and consistency became safety. But somewhere beneath that safety, a quiet fracture formed, one no technique could repair. The chef felt it first during moments between services. Staring at pages he had rewritten countless times, he realized the menu no longer reflected who he was. It reflected who he used to be. Every dish was correct, yet none felt personal. Cooking had turned into repetition, and repetition had begun to feel like avoidance. Today, menus are branding tools. They explain intent, signal belonging, promise reliability. But originally, menus were declarations, statement of belief written in food. To understand why this one changed, we have to return to the moment the chef stopped asking what worked and started asking what was true. The shift began subtly. One dish disappeared without announcement. Another returned altered, simpler, more exposed. Ingredients once chosen for prestige were replaced by ones tied to memory. The chef didn't call it evolution. He didn't call it risk. He called it relief. Guests noticed immediately. Some praised the boldness. Others asked what happened to their favorite plates. A few sensed something deeper, but couldn't name it. The menu felt quieter now, less eager to impress, more willing to pause. It asked diners to meet it halfway. Behind the scenes, the kitchen felt unsettled. Line cooks questioned direction. Managers worried about perception. The chef listened, but did not retreat. For the first time in years, he was not building an identity. He was revealing one. What no one realized yet was that this menu was no longer a collection of dishes. It was a confession, and once spoken, even silently, there would be no returning to comfort, because honesty, once allowed onto the page, demands to be carried all the way through. The reaction arrived unevenly. Regulars compared old menus from memory, searching for what had changed. Critics sensed a shift but struggled to frame it. The language they used softened, becoming less certain. Words like refined and controlled gave way to exposed and personal. The menu resisted summary, and that resistance unsettled people. Inside the kitchen, tension grew. Cooks asked for clearer direction. Was this a phase? A test? A response to trends? The chef answered honestly. He didn't know where it would end. He only knew he could no longer cook things he didn't believe in. That uncertainty spread to the room, heavy but sincere. Cooking stopped being about execution and started being about alignment. As weeks passed, the menu continued changing, not dramatically, deliberately. Dishes were removed mid-service if they no longer felt right. New ones appeared without explanation, sometimes staying only a few days. The chef began writing notes in the margins of the menu, memories, questions, reminders to himself. The menu became less like a product and more like a journal. Guests responded emotionally, even when they couldn't articulate why. Some felt uncomfortable, as if reading something private without permission. Others felt closer to the chef than ever before. The meal no longer felt transactional. It felt intimate, vulnerable, as if the kitchen was trusting diners with something unfinished. But intimacy carries risk. Reservations dipped, predictability vanished. Advisors urged stability. They warned that audiences reward clarity, not ambiguity. That confession without resolution could be mistaken for confusion. The chef heard them, but could not reverse what had already been revealed. One evening, a guest approached him quietly after service. They thanked him for the meal, then said something unexpected. Hashtag left double quotation mark text equals text.replace 94. It felt like you were telling the truth tonight. 94. The chef realized then that the menu had crossed a line. It was no longer experimenting. It was exposing. And exposure invites judgment. The conflict sharpened. Would he protect the restaurant by retreating into coherence, or continue forward, knowing that a confession unfinished is still a confession? The answer was forming with every service. And soon, the menu would force a moment that could no longer be softened by explanation or intent. The moment arrived on an ordinary night. No critics announced themselves. No special guests were expected. Yet, halfway through service, the chef felt the weight of the menu pressing harder than ever before. A dish left the past that no longer felt true, but it was already ordered, already promised. He watched it go. The discomfort stayed with him, not as panic, but as certainty. The menu had begun to contradict itself. Some dishes spoke honestly. Others clung to safety. The confession was incomplete, and that inconsistency felt like dishonesty. After service, the chef made a decision that startled the staff. He removed half the menu. This is what I can stand behind. The kitchen felt exposed. Without variety to hide behind, every plate mattered more. Each mistake was visible. Each success undeniable. Cooking slowed. Focus sharpened. The menu stopped pretending to be complete. Industry voices responded quickly. Articles speculated about instability. Advisors called the move reckless. They argued that vulnerability was not a business model, that a restaurant must offer confidence, not confession. The chef listened, but did not respond. Something irreversible had happened. The menu was no longer trying to please everyone. It was trying to be honest. And honesty, once embraced, does not negotiate easily with comfort. Guests who stayed noticed a shift. Meals felt quieter, heavier, more deliberate. Diners did not rush. They asked fewer questions. They trusted more. The menu felt less like an offering and more like a conversation, one that required patience rather than approval. But the cost was real. Revenue dipped. Uncertainty spread. Staff wondered how long the restaurant could sustain this level of exposure. The chef wondered too. But retreating now would mean erasing what had already been said. The confession had reached its peak. All that remained was to decide whether it would end in protection or in transformation. The final course of this story was approaching. The restaurant survived, but not in the way anyone predicted. It became smaller, not in size, but in ambition. The menu stopped chasing coherence and started honoring continuity. Dishes stayed longer now, not because they sold well, but because they still felt true. When they didn't, they disappeared without apology. Guests adapted. Those who needed certainty found it elsewhere. Those who stayed learned to arrive without expectations. They stopped asking what the menu meant and started asking how it felt. Meals unfolded like conversations that didn't rush toward conclusion. The confession no longer demanded attention. It simply existed. Inside the kitchen, something settled. Cooks learned to trust fewer dishes more deeply. Mistakes were acknowledged without panic. Success was quieter, more internal. The chef no longer felt the need to explain himself, not because he was certain, but because he was aligned. The menu had stopped being a performance and become a reflection. Years later, critics would describe the restaurant as restrained, honest, difficult to define. Some would praise it. Others would dismiss it. The chef stopped reading. He understood that once confession is spoken, its meaning no longer belongs to the speaker. What mattered was this. The menu never returned to what it had been. It didn't need to. It had done its work. It had allowed the chef to stop hiding behind consistency and start cooking from presence. And in doing so, it offered guests something rare, a chance to witness someone telling the truth in real time. In a culture that rewards polish and resolution, that kind of honesty is uncomfortable, but it is also magnetic. It invites reflection without instruction. It asks nothing except attention. Because sometimes the bravest thing a creator can do is not innovate or disrupt, but confess quietly and keep going. Subscribe to join the journey. When a